Oh, yeah. I forget to have the mic close by. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict Show. So excited to be with you today. What are we going to be talking about today?
We've got some really juicy topics because there's a lot going on in the world, and a lot of it is centered around Russia and China and the Ukraine conflict. But some other interesting things are happening too, including what's happening in Niger right now.
Of
So
course.
we've got kind of a jam-packed show for you guys today.
Yeah. So, we're gonna cover like what 3 or 4 topics or so.
Yeah,
So,
it's going to be 4 topics, but that's because so much is going on right now. And it's really interestingly critical stuff, and it's escalation type stuff.
yeah. Well, good. Then let's start with the Russian Chinese near the U.S. waters. So, by the way, guys, if this is your first time on this channel, make sure to subscribe. We really appreciate it. So, this now it's coming up to light as far as the combined Russian and Chinese naval force patrolling in the Alaska. It's called, I think, the I have the name of the islands, Aleutian Islands. Aleutian Islands.
Would you like to see where that is?
Sure.
I have a map.
I had a. Believe it or not, I was looking for it this morning. I had a satellite image. I lost it.
That would have been cool. I just have a map. That's a little bit less cool, but at least I got a satellite image.
Life goes on. So, let's see that map there.
Oh, sorry. I just took it off. Here you go. Let's check it out.
Yeah, the one I had similar, but a satellite, but it was showing the waters right on this side here.
Yeah.
With all the Russians and Chinese vessels. So what's interesting? Well, we're not going to be talking about how many and what type of vessels and what the U.S. sent to the patrol. All this is irrelevant. The reason why is irrelevant because you want to, like I always say, in international relations, context matters. The fact that there are 11 ships from between Russia and China near the U.S. water is enough to send the image outside.
Yep.
That's basically the key as to what you need to understand of it. Of course, the significance of it is because it has to do with the idea of Russia and China sending a message to the U.S. what it feels like. That's the reason for it. It's almost like having a taste of our own medicine, shall we say. It was a very interesting image that I kept somewhere, and I'm gonna try to find it. The reason being because it shows the
well, so as you're trying
go ahead.
No,
because I need to look for it here.
I'll let you look for it. So as we're talking about it, it's interesting. So the Wall Street Journal called it the largest such flotilla to approach American shores in recent history, but it didn't actually enter American territorial waters. So
it can't, because you can't enter international waters because you have about 12 nautical miles.
Right.
So, and they know it. The Russians and Chinese smart enough to know, because it will trigger once you violate into the waters of another country.
Right.
That's a problem.
It is. And that triggers some really big things. And it seems to me that that's not necessarily what they wanted to do here, because I think the big deal is, the US has been doing this for a long time in terms of the Taiwan issue.
Yeah.
So, we've had joint American and Canadian drills. We've had Americans that come through, the American naval fleet that comes through those waters, but they also don't cross the line, right? And it's a demonstration. There's a word for it, right? And it is freedom of navigation, right? It's freedom of navigation operations. And this is a really big sign that points to China and Russia are kind of starting to push back. They're starting to have similar kind of tit-for-tat provocations here.
Yeah. Let me share a screen with you guys.
Yeah, let's see it.
Take a look at this one here. Check this out. No comments needed. I'll let you guys figure that out. Just look at it. What it says on the right, what it says on the left.
Yep.
Which, to your point, freedom of navigation. Did you see where,
Right.
when we do it in South China Sea, we call it freedom of navigation. When Alaska, when the Russians or Chinese went to Alaska, we call it what? Provocation.
Exactly.
So to your point, that's exactly true, and that's how. As I said earlier, this is. Oh, I need to say thank you to Jennifer Lee. Thank you so much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate it. So as I said earlier, it has to do with the context.
Mm-hmm.
And this is again because as an analyst, as geopolitical analyst, I have to think in terms of what message and what signals are both the Chinese and the Russians are sending. And this didn't came in a vacuum. This one was hashed out based on what I found right after the joint naval exercises between Russia and China in the Sea of Japan,
Mm-hmm.
we just took about a month ago. So Japan was, of course, freaked out over it because Japan will be freaked out about it.
Understandably
South
so.
Korea
Understandably
also,
so,
because South Korea, it's almost feel comfortable saying, has no sovereignty left.
yeah.
So, and even with Philippines, now that I am a very my suspicion or my concerns back then now is coming to
Fruition. Yeah.
full realization as to my instinct was spot on.
About the bases in Philippines.
The basis, but not only that, is about the president of Philippines,
Yeah.
Marcos Jr. turns up to be wasn't as strong as, because I start to suspect that 3 months after he took power,
Yeah.
based on his policies, and when he did the trip to China,
Yeah.
I didn't believe in that trip. I said to myself, he is playing games.
Yeah.
He is playing games, wanted to give the Chinese a lip service.
Yeah.
And he confirmed it to me right after the agreement between Philippines and the US about the 4 bases.
Yeah.
And actually, they weren't 4, they were 9,
Right.
based on what I found
Right.
out. So to go back, tie it to this Alaska thing, I think the decision between Russia and China to go ahead and let's go near Alaska
Yeah.
was hashed out during the joint navals in the Sea of Japan.
Yeah.
But again, what does it mean? Because if you are to think about it, what does it mean geopolitically?
Absolutely. And do you also think, because this is very interesting timing, because there was just also, and this is something we'll talk about
Yeah.
a little bit later, there was the peace talks between Ukraine and Russia that Saudi Arabia hosted, that it was not between Ukraine and Russia.
I know,
It
that's why I'm laughing.
you know what I'm saying? Russia was explicitly not invited, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
And nothing really came out of it. But it is very interesting that we're sort of seeing this timing, because China was there and China was involved in these talks.
That's true. But also China was also turned down when it proposed its own. So
right.
And we'll talk about this after we finish this one here. So the whole idea that why the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan called it a historical first. Well, yeah, because we've always watched and noticed that the Chinese and the Russians never wanted to come close to our shores to provoke the US, because to them, if I am to think, there was no need for it. Why? Why provoke? But rather, like I showed in that image, if we are to go to South China Sea or go somewhere near the Russian borders, we're going to say, well, it's freedom of navigation. And this is why, for example, I think about it now, why. Sort of I have the answer as to why the Russian Federation, way back, few years ago, way back, I think it was in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, or 6, went ahead and planted the Russian flag, titanium flag, into the bottom of the Arctic.
Yeah.
Just to avoid from moving forward when a country will come over and say, oh, freedom of navigation.
Yeah.
They already claimed that it's part of their northern part. So what this basically signifies geopolitically, that signifies now that the shift in the in the global system is already upon us. It's already here.
Yeah.
Let's not pretend otherwise. I know Washington is living in denial about it, the collective West is living in denial about it. It's almost like what they did with Budapest, with Hungary, trying to punish now Viktor Orban
Yeah.
about taking stand regarding the accession of Sweden into NATO. Yeah, why punish the guy?
Yeah.
So sort of like their parliament didn't want to vote on it. So this is where I see it moving forward is that Russia and China in coordination together, they're gonna just do this regularly. So
Yeah.
could we see a next one near the Gulf of Mexico?
Very possibly.
Possibly not. They understand the limitations as far as the 12 nautical miles. That's usually the international water that's
Yeah.
been agreed upon. Do we respect that and observe that? I'll let you reach your own conclusion for that. So,
Well, and it's interesting because we did a show on China's base in Cuba, the secret base.
yes.
And so, as you're talking about the Gulf, as you're talking about sort of the southern part of the United States, we are. I personally believe that the US government has known about this type of stuff for a very long time. It's just right now it's coming out. And I want to point out a very interesting tweet by Senator Dan Sullivan. So I'm going to share this with you guys because there's a very interesting narrative that's going on here right now. And that is that, this is, and you showed this in the cartoon that you did. So let me add this to this stream. So this is from Alaskan Senator Dan Sullivan. And so he said the incursion by 11 Chinese and Russian warships operating together off the coast of Alaska is yet another reminder that we have entered into a new era of authoritarian aggression led by the dictators in Beijing and Moscow. So this language is very inflammatory. And it is another one of those sort of stoking the fire, and saying, oh, well, look, this is this is another aggression. And interestingly enough, because linguistics is one of my trainings and strong suits, look at authoritarian aggression. What do we say linguistically when we're looking at Putin's invasion, right, of Ukraine? Russian aggression. So look at the same words that we see, and you think, oh no, it's nothing. No, it is. These words are very clearly crafted. Russian aggression. And so your mind goes to, well, there was Russian aggression in Ukraine too. That's the words that have been strategically chosen to be used. And so now we're seeing authoritarian aggression again. So these things are very carefully crafted, and I want to bring attention to that because they're crafted pretty well.
For a reason.
They're crafted for a reason to really stick in people's minds.
Well, because here in the US, I mean, just it was like what it was back in the Cold War. It was you identify the enemy, so you keep repeating it over and over and over, and we got a population that is ill-informed, so all they're going to be hearing is the word being repeated. The fact that it started with what was the first word? The first word.
So the first word, authoritarian?
No.
Incursion.
Incursion.
Yeah.
Right there, incursion.
Absolutely.
Which you and I know it's not an incursion.
It is
because
not.
They were on international waters.
Right.
So average Joe, average Jane here in the US is not going to even understand. They're not going to understand the how international law applies to waters as far as how many nautical miles far out. Right. This is 12 nautical miles. That's quite a distance before, and yet he's starting it with
absolutely.
It's just because as I said, they're gonna be repeating the mantra of that's and that is the reason why I said at the beginning, you have to put it within the context of what it means. Because in international relations, context matters. Remember that, guys.
Absolutely.
Remember that always. Just because you read something doesn't mean that's what it is. And second, sometimes you don't need to have so many analyses and all that. Image will be enough. Believe it or not, Chinese tends to be good at that. Image will speak louder.
Absolutely.
They don't need to say too many words, too much whatever. The image itself sends that message that they want to convey.
Right.
And this one, in my opinion, that's the message they're sending. Hey, we can do it too
Yeah.
if we want to. So
Absolutely.
that is where
Absolutely.
it used to be a couple of years ago. I remember in 2014, if I recall. I don't remember where the article is right now. I wrote it for when I used to write for the Huffington Post. You
Yeah,
remember the
yeah, yeah.
Huffington
I
Post?
do. Oh man.
It's still there.
You
There are,
know, we need to send links to some of your
yeah. If you
articles. We need to
guys,
put links.
we can. I'll get you the link later on. I'll get you on this. This still because they kept them. It's public record.
Yeah.
Well, there is one article there that I wrote back then that the Chinese at that time were conducting some training, naval
Yeah.
trainings. And one of the, and they disclosed it, it wasn't like secret. One of the disclosure was a type of missiles that can be launched from there and they
Mhm.
will target Hawaii in no time.
Wow. Yeah.
So again, why they saying this? Why they show the train one? A
Right.
message. They don't
Right.
need to say it. It was just a message
Absolutely.
for. So this Alaska thing,
Yeah.
it's to me just a strong message, but it also convey that to the US, you need to sort of be cognizant of what you're doing in the South China Sea
Right.
regarding Taiwan, or regarding now you're looking at the uh, the commissioning of the USS Canberra
Yeah.
in
In
Australia.
Australia.
And you saw the image of the kangaroo, right?
Oh yeah.
Kangaroo in
Oh
star
yeah. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Starling Space.
I wish we had that
I
somewhere.
think I did somewhere, but
No, it's
I
okay.
doubt it. Maybe I
It's
removed
in
it.
another episode, guys.
Yeah,
If you want to go
yeah.
find it, it's in another episode.
Well, it was because now here is the logical argument to that. How do you think we will feel
Right.
if, let's say, Australia, Germany, France, whatever, comes over to our country,
Right.
establish, let's say, vessel of sort, whatever, and puts their flag embedded with
Right.
ours? How are we gonna
Right.
react to that or feel about that?
Absolutely. And
So,
it's interesting because remember when there actually was a whole thing about how, oh, we're not going to put a base in Australia. We're going
no,
to
no.
allow the
Uh,
submarines to come in and
a
out, right?
rotational.
Rotational.
What?
And
Yeah,
do you remember
yeah,
that
yeah.
happening? So it was a rotational on the submarines. The problem with that is that if you rotate it, you can still have
So,
one there
yeah,
all the time.
that's one of our policy is that we never say the term permanent,
Right.
but we do rotationals. We've been doing this for a long time. As a matter of fact, one of my former unit in the military
Yeah.
was on a regular rotational basis in the Middle East, without disclosing
It's never
the country.
permanent.
So yeah, so if only Aussies or Australians that is really understand now what's going on in their country,
Right.
as far as how many bases now we're going to be operating.
Right.
We're talking about a B-52 is going to be now over there.
And that's,
You know what a B-52 is?
yeah,
right?
tell us, what is a B-52?
That's a nuclear carrier.
Yeah.
That
Well,
carries a
the
nuclear
subs
weapon.
also were nuclear carriers,
Well,
remember?
when you have a B-52,
Yeah.
anytime you have a B-52, that's for carpet bombing, as we call it. That's when you flat out everything. So why are you sending? And the problem with all this is that in that part of Pacific has always been nuclear free zone.
Yeah.
This is why New Zealand pushed back.
Yeah.
But even New Zealand,
I
I'm
don't
starting
think
to have my doubts because New Zealand is part of the Five Eyes members.
Yeah.
And who is in the Five Eyes? All the whites,
Yeah.
Anglo, I think New Zealand, Australia, Canada, US,
Yep.
and UK. So that's where the problem is. In New Zealand, at least still holding on to that
Yeah.
nuclear free zone. So the idea of this Alaska thing is just, again, to send the message to the US.
Right.
Remember,
Yeah.
we can do it as well. And both Russians and Chinese, mind you, that China has a lot of
Yeah.
naval assets. They have more
Absolutely.
ships than we do.
Well, and I think the reality is that, if this were, I might agree with the senator here that it was an incursion if it wasn't for the fact
I
that the
disagree
US
with that.
Well,
I
hold on,
disagree with that.
I didn't even get my
disagree with
point out
that.
yet.
But the moment you said, I might agree
No.
with the senator, because the senator is wrong.
Right. No, I
He
agree
is
he's wrong.
advocating to ensure the votes.
No, I know.
That's
I know.
no different than what's her name? Nikki Haley now. The idiots are running for president. And you know what
Yeah.
she's running on?
Yeah.
We're going to fight the Chinese. How stupid that is.
No. Yeah.
How
we do-
stupid that is.
It's very
And that's why I
stupid.
said the fact that his statements start with that word.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in Washington. I understand how
Right.
to read the statements. The fact that he started with this,
Yeah.
that's it. I don't need to read anymore.
Yeah.
That's it. So sorry to
No,
interrupt
it's
because
okay.
I
Well,
had to.
I actually agree with you.
Yeah.
But it's because we have absolutely not acknowledged the fact that the US has been doing this
Yeah.
for years at this point. And it feels very interesting to me that China and Russia now feel strong enough
Enough.
to be able to come back and say, sorry, we can do the same thing that you guys are doing. And that really is a first. That really is a new thing in this version of history, right? Because the power, people think that because when we've been alive, when most of us have been alive, the United States has been the global hegemon.
Yeah.
But the US was not always. Our Independence Day is from Britain,
That's true.
right? We
Yeah.
we forget that when we look at the fact that other countries were hegemon before we were. And so this is very clearly a shift of power, because if Russia and China didn't feel strong enough, they wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
And so I completely disagree with the senator, because he is absolutely not acknowledging the fact that this was already being done to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, and the fact there is also much bigger picture that they are
Yeah.
sort of what's the word I'm looking for, that they are oblivious to or not even aware of.
Right.
They might hear about, but they don't fully comprehend
Absolutely.
or understand its premise, and that
Yeah.
has to do with the broader great power rivalry in
Yeah.
the Arctic.
Absolutely.
If you
Oh
look
my
at
gosh,
where
huge.
Alaska is,
Yeah.
and you look at that part of the
Yeah.
globe and access to the Arctic, that's also another
It is.
message sent to the US.
That's a great
Yeah,
point.
yeah. Well, that's why you get the media doesn't even talk about this.
Yeah.
They're not gonna put it in context
Yeah.
to begin with. This
You're
is why I
absolutely
said,
right.
yeah. As an analyst, you're gonna have to think about the big picture, as
Yeah.
I always say. I know I keep repeating myself.
No, but you're right. You're absolutely right.
It's because the competition in the Arctic, what
Yep.
lies there under that ice. I did mention this before. I
Yeah.
wrote about it in the book. About $35 trillion
Mhm.
worth of untapped natural resources.
Yep.
$35 trillion.
Yep.
And I referenced that with the source and everything. So
Yeah.
it wasn't something I just made up.
No,
I
absolutely.
can make things up. I don't
Yeah.
make things up. So because that's my credibility online.
Yeah.
So my reputation, my credibility online, I can do that.
Well, and
So,
now it's starting to come out, right? So
yeah, and
really,
this is the idea of the other message that the Chinese and the Russians are sending, because the Arctic, because the Arctic will represent another ground where the competition between major power, like
hugely
what we're seeing right now in
in
Africa.
Africa.
So
Okay. So do you want to go next into Russia's economy?
no, Africa. Let's go to
Africa.
Africa.
All right. Let's just
Let's
jump
go to
straight into
Africa.
Africa. All right.
While we're still
So
thinking about it.
the next topic is, there's some very interesting stuff happening in Niger. Specifically, that they're very concerned. So, obviously there was the coup in Niger. It was a successful coup.
Yeah.
And now Niger's junta is concerned about an invasion threat from other Western-backed countries that are around it. And I think that's not an unfounded concern for them.
That's an ECOWAS. ECOWAS is the economic economic cooperation.
Yeah.
No, ECOWAS, Economic Organization of Western African States.
I have it. Economic Community
of Western African States.
It's a bit of a mouthful for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the big concern with that is that, believe it or not, the deadline is on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, now they changed it to Sunday. So basically what the ECOWAS wants to do is trying to intimidate Niger. Where the problem with that people in Niger, people there.
Yeah.
And by the way, do you know who is now in Niamey, the capital of Niger?
Who specifically?
Victoria Nuland.
Is
there.
she really?
She's there. Yeah.
What a surprise.
Yeah, I had to confirm.
That's
I had
very
to confirm
interesting.
that one. And she is let me share this with you guys so
Please.
you see.
So as you're doing that, David,
Yeah.
so ECOWAS, I wanna sort of make clear who all is in ECOWAS.
Yeah.
Is Benin, Burkina Faso, Cabo Verde, Cote d'Ivoire, the Gambia, Ghana, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau,
Guinea-Bissau. Yeah.
Liberia,
Liberia.
Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, and Togo.
Yeah.
So this is very, very interesting because the
let me
reality is
share.
that a lot of those countries, quite frankly,
Yeah.
do have a very massive Western influence inside of them. And after you share this,
Yeah,
there it is.
it's
There
right
it
there.
is.
And what it says right there, it just I read it to you guys. Victoria
Please.
Nolan in Niger's capital and requested to see the detained former president Bazoum. Her request was denied by the military junta. Yep. So she is there. But here is the big question. And her arguments,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna put this to you also, guys, because the reason we do these live streams is to have you involved as well. Your opinion matters.
Yeah.
So here is one of the things she was requesting. She was asking the reinstatement to reinstate Mohamed
Right.
Bazoum as the democratically elected.
Mhm.
Yes, he was elected. But here is the thing. How come we are saying, oh, we need to restore the democratically elected Mohamed Bazoum in Niger,
Good question.
but we couldn't say that in Ukraine when we removed the elected
Yeah.
president?
Absolutely.
See what I mean? That's the
Yep.
double standards. Second, Niger now, the military,
Mhm.
they're saying bring it on because
Yeah.
France is threatening
Yep.
Niger. Well, why is France threatening Niger?
Well, France has quite a lot of interests in Niger.
Two main ones:
Mm-hmm.
gold
Yep.
and uranium.
Yep.
Here's the thing: any light bulb in France is made through uranium from Niger.
Yep.
Second thing: how much do you think France sells uranium per pound? Give me a number. Let's guess.
Oh,
Just
God,
give me a number.
I don't know.
Just guess. Give me a number. Doesn't matter.
A lot.
1 pound. 1 pound. Just
300,000.
no, that's too much. You know,
Oh, okay.
they're selling that for $238 a pound.
Oh.
How much a Niger worker who's
Yeah.
working that make?
Oh my God.
$11.
Yeah.
$11. France selling it for 230.
Yeah.
Third element to all this. Why is this hypes about all France is? It's because some countries in Africa still till today, their money,
Yeah.
paper, is printed in France,
Yeah.
not in Africa.
Which is ridiculous because
Yeah.
that's a stranglehold on money.
Exactly.
It's a stranglehold on the financial system of these countries.
Ex-
And a lot of these countries have been kept down economically
For a reason.
for a reason.
Yes.
So for $11 a day, a worker can go and produce
Yeah.
basically what's a profit machine for France. And that's not different, right? It's not different here.
Well, we have it here with Nike, for example.
Yeah.
I'm not against Nike. I don't buy Nike, but
Yeah.
I'm not against Nike. Adidas does it. All those top brands. You know how much it costs a Nike shoe to make in Southeast Asia? Because that's where they have them
Like
in Bangladesh.
$1.50
Somewhere
maybe.
around that. You
Yeah.
add the cost of the freight, you add the cost of insurance.
Yeah.
So if we are to think the shoe costs, let's say $30,
Yeah.
I will go as far as $50.
Yeah.
How much did they sell it here?
200,
200
yeah.
plus. Because that athletes in America that has his name on will have to get his share.
Right.
You know, that's why I kind of like, I explained to my own, like,
Yeah.
do you understand how this shoe is made?
And they don't.
Yeah.
People don't.
And those kids in the Southeast Asia are working 12-hour day for about $1.
Yeah.
I know it's business is harsh the way and not just no, I'm not picking on Nike. Adidas does it.
Oh,
Puma does it.
most people do.
Yeah.
In most companies do it, and it's interesting also because this is a big thing that's coming up here in the United States, is sort of a groundswell,
Yeah.
because we here also have that problem with workers here. You know, if you go to Amazon just quelched not that long ago an attempt at unionization,
Oh yes.
because you know Amazon employees don't necessarily get paid very well. If you look at Walmart doesn't pay its employees well enough. There's a large section of Walmart employees
Yeah.
that are still on welfare, that are still getting food stamps, that cannot afford to have their own house. There was I remember reading an article. I haven't been able to find it again,
Mhm.
and this is probably for a reason, but I remember reading an article where Walmart was bragging about how many homeless people it employed.
Yeah.
If your employees are homeless,
That's a
there's
problem.
a problem.
Serious problem.
And the cost of everything is going up. And so people here are starting to wake up to the
Yeah.
fact that this has been going on around the world for decades.
That's true. Let's say thank you to Hong Wan. Thank you so much for your super sticker. You wrote the US hides behind freedom of navigation, but when it comes to China and Russia, they use the UN. I think that's the law of the sea. Yeah,
Yeah.
the law. Yet they haven't signed the agreement. That's true.
Yeah.
That is true, Hong. Thank you so much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate it. So let's go back to Niger idea.
Yeah.
So where do I see the big issue? Well, the big issue,
Yeah.
not the big issue, but rather the shift that is taking in Africa. Remember a couple months ago, I mentioned that Africa is going to become the geopolitical ring by
Right.
which major power is going to be displaying, like the
Right.
competition is going to get even fierce. Well, you got now the young president of Mali, if I'm not mistaken, or Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore.
Yeah.
He was a captain, by the way. You know what he just did after he took over power?
Well, he's siding with Niger.
Niger, but what
yeah.
else he did? That's a lot of
What?
people do not know. He gave up his salary as
Mhm.
president. He just gave
Yeah.
it up,
Yeah.
and he's saying
I have a
now
lot of respect for that.
he's fierce. I can
Yeah.
just see. I'm
Yeah.
a former military. We know what to look for.
Yeah.
He's one that will challenge France or whomever.
Yeah.
And now he's saying he's going to fight alongside Niger. Burkina
Yeah.
Faso is going to fight alongside Niger.
Yeah.
Algeria, even now, Algeria sent its troops to the border because they're border with Niger.
Right.
So, but Algeria has a different calculations, and that calculation has to do with France, because France is threatening to. It's like, well, bring it on.
Yeah.
This is why now the West want to use the ECOWAS, because they are Africans, but they get in heat from the locals.
Right.
How can you turn on your brother?
Right.
That's how they're looking at it.
Yeah.
It's because the ECOWAS, it's under the Western. This is why
Absolutely.
Victoria Nolan
Mhm.
is in Niamey, the capital of
Yeah.
Niger. That's why she's there. This time around, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Because you get the young leadership now in Africa, like Ibrahim Traore.
Right.
They're seeing things differently. The whole coup, why it happened to begin with, is because that president, Mohamed Bazoum,
Yeah.
hasn't served the people. Yes, he was democratically elected,
Yeah.
but when people still living in poverty and
Mass
you have
poverty.
massive wealth under your ground and you're not benefiting from it,
Yeah.
what the heck are you doing?
Absolutely.
So that's the reason why. And I think if ECOWAS thinking of intimidating Niger, that will be a mistake, because they will be ready to fight.
Yeah.
Let alone there is the big wild card. You know what the big wild card is?
What?
Wagner Group
Yes,
is-
I was
is
about
ba-
to bring that up.
yeah, is
Absolutely.
being called in because of request. And Russia also has to think about access to resources.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, now the French president, Emmanuel Macron, said to Niger, we're going to stop the aid.
Yeah.
You know what was the... no, he said that to either Burkina Faso or to Ibrahim Traore,
Mhm.
that young captain.
Yeah.
I wish I had a picture of him, but anyway, what he returned and said, hey, you keep that aid. We don't need it.
Mhm.
Simple as that.
Well,
The US threatened also to cut off the aid.
Yeah.
The aid, you know what that general said from Niger?
Yeah.
He said, why don't you, to the US, why don't you use that aid to alleviate homelessness in America?
Yes. which is not wrong.
Not
That's
wrong.
not wrong.
Not at
And
all.
you know what I think is interesting is all of this is coming, and this is not being talked about in the West when this topic is being talked about.
Mm.
The Wagner Group, how much now infrastructure is being built up
Built.
all over Africa by China and Russia.
That's true.
By China and Russia purchasing these mines
Excuse
and
me.
putting investment into the communities. Now, do I think China and Russia are doing it out of the goodness of their heart? No.
No, that's
I think they see what everyone else sees, and
it's
that is
investment.
that it's investment.
But at least on equal footing.
At least it's in a way that raises people up instead of holding them down, which I think is the big issue that globally people have with the United States is, and it's not the people here in the United States are good people, but we have embarked on policies globally that have been designed to keep people down. And I can tell you that's true because look at the state of Africa with all the aid it's received. With all the aid it's received, you have people living in extreme poverty. It's been getting aid for decades. And what good has that done it?
Yeah, but also not just the aid, but also is the access to their resources that they are not benefiting from, because it's the Western world that is having access to. The history of Africa, from the Dutch, the Portuguese, the Belgians, the Germans, the French, of course, and some time us as well. So the whole history of Africa, it's very dark when it comes down to the presence of why. Because I mean, you look at it just like for the idea of France declaring itself as the fourth in the world when it comes down to gold. With 4,000, I even memorized the number. 4,062 tons of gold. Well, how can you do this when you don't even have a single mine in France? So where that gold came from? It came from those countries. That's simple as that. So, and this is why I believe this recent coup in Niger will be a geopolitical turning points in Africa trajectory. It's going to change the dynamics upside down. And the other African countries that's still thinking with the Western mindset, they're going to wake up to the reality. As a matter of fact, they're going to be faced with some harsh reality moving forward.
Well, so it's very interesting that you're talking about the other African countries because, this is from March, but Representative Matt Gaetz, he during a hearing, he asked some very poignant questions about U.S. military training and interventions all throughout Africa. It's actually, in its own way, very cathartic to watch this. Let's show him, basically show how ridiculous this situation is. I'm going to add it. Okay. We can
General
hear it too,
Langley, I have constituents that have been scattered across Africa on train and equip missions. So just ballpark, in the last decade, how many Africans has the United States military trained and equipped?
Congressman, I don't have that figure. I can get that figure for you.
Ballpark, just, how many?
Congressman, it would be a wild guess, right?
Seems like something we should know, right?
Over the years,
sure does.
We have trained a substantial number, especially in the Gulf of Guinea states, but including
like more than 10,000.
It is more than 10,000.
More than 50,000.
I'd say we're reaching around 50,000 at least.
And
50,
what percentage of the people we've trained end up participating in insurrections or coups against their own government?
Very small number, Congressman. Very small number.
So what percentage do you think?
I'd say probably less than 1%.
But it does happen.
The IMET program is in force, and we've pushed a significant number through our schools across the.
And what data sets do you track to arrive at the conclusion that less than 1% of the roughly 50,000 that we've trained have participated in coups? Because it'd be like about 500, about 1% of 50,000.
Congressman, you may have that information. I don't at this time, but I know.
Well, I know there are some, right? Like go ahead and throw up that image. This is Colonel Mamade Doumbouya, and this is a photo of him. Did we train and equip him?
Yes, we did.
In Guinea?
By name, I cannot identify that.
Well, that guy in the middle with the big red hat, Colonel Mamade Doumbouya, that's him with a bunch of U.S. service members outside of our embassy. And just months after this photo was taken in 2021, he led a coup in Guinea and threw out the leader. Does that concern you?
Congressman, core values is what we start off with in IMA programs.
Do we share
stick to
Core values.
Yeah. So you guys got the idea of, and yes, we do have a presence. I was in Djibouti, and we do have a presence there and so forth. But beside all this, is the idea. Oh, let me say thank you to Raphael.
Oh, Raphael, it's nice.
Raphael,
to see you.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. So the idea of how now, I think this, like I said earlier, this is going to be a turning point, geopolitical turning points when it comes down to, because it's now or never for those African, especially young leaders.
Right.
Because for the guy to take over power and give up his salary,
Yeah.
you know, he could be on for some good thing.
Yeah.
Are we going to allow that or let that happen? This is where those dynamics is going to be. France is not willing to let go because France has access to that. As I mentioned last time, still till today, France still gets about $500 billion in colonial tax.
Yeah.
When,
That's a lot.
we're in 2023.
Yeah. Well, and
Colonial.
where does that take that money out of? Right. It takes
Yeah.
that money out of countries that actually really desperately need it. They really desperately need that economic boost.
Yeah.
And I think, what was sort of revealed in this hearing, and this was in March, right? So, this isn't new. This isn't sort of a new issue, but, looking at the situation and having basically the government be like, oh, well, I don't have this information. I don't have this information.
No.
And the amount of, it was literally what he's talking about is the amount of African soldiers basically that have been trained and then somehow participate in coups. Even if that number is 500, that's a lot.
Still problematic. Yeah.
And so it leans itself towards something much bigger that's happening. And that is sort of the revealing of how much secret influence there really is in the world. And I want to bring that up because this isn't a, people who go outside the mainstream narrative are often really ostracized for it until it comes out as true. And recently, a lot of the sort of fringe or conspiracy type theories, a lot of them have started coming out as true.
Yeah.
And-
Well, the whole Africa situation, it's about, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of corruption in Africa. as
Oh
well.
my gosh.
Let's also be realistic, because we can't just assume that just because of this, no, this could work out or it could not.
Absolutely.
Like what it was back in history. If you look at a history of, for example, I remember a guy, it was a colleague of mine I worked with. It was in Washington, D.C., and it was originally from Sudan.
Yeah.
And he shared a story with me that I didn't know. Did you know that back then, and I wish I could have looked at the name for that, but he used to be a general who conducted a coup in Sudan. Took over.
Yeah.
And once the dust settled, you know what that general did?
What?
He turned over power to a new civilian government.
Yeah.
The reason why he did the coup is to save the country from internal,
Right.
The social, ethnic, and all that, because Sudan is also tribal society.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ethnic groups. That reminds me of India,
Yeah.
for example. And he did the coup to save the country. Once the dust settles, he turned over power. Could this Ibrahim Traore, the young guy, do it? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Right.
One thing that I am certain of is that they're going to stand up to the West.
Yeah.
Either, win or die.
Yeah.
That's how they're going to look at it, because to them, time is now. No more exploitation of Africa.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I think it's very interesting timing, especially considering the amount of investment that is being poured into Africa from Russia and China. I think that's worth noting.
Indeed. So let's get on the other topic that we need to. Raphael, once again, we did, Raphael.
Yeah.
I'll say it again, Raphael. Thank you so much for your super sticker, man. I appreciate it. I'm keeping an eye on this because I always like to express thanks first, and as we move forward, and we truly appreciate your support,
We
guys.
do.
Yeah. What is our third topic?
Okay, so our third topic is Russia's economy is actually growing despite US sanctions. This to
Yeah.
me is kind of a big deal because we imposed sanctions on Russia, right? We imposed them, and we've imposed sanctions on the United States. I always say we, and that sounds very
That's
strange to
us.
me because
That's
I
us.
personally would not have chosen to put sanctions.
Yeah.
At least to weaponize sanctions to this extent. So the big issue is that the US weaponizes sanctions, and the countries that have been weaponized against have had to band together and figure out what else to do.
Yeah.
So Russia's economy is actually growing despite US sanctions on it. And the US has crippled smaller countries with sanctions, absolutely crippled them. But it didn't cripple Russia, which is beyond interesting.
Yeah.
Because what has happened, so the IMF actually said that it expects the Russian economy to grow by 1.5% this year. Granted, last year it did shrink by 2.1%.
Mhm.
However, it's gaining that back.
Which is impressive.
It's very impressive.
Yeah.
But what's happening is that Russia has actually had to go out and make other alliances. It's had to find other places to sell its oil, for example.
Yeah.
And it's found those places.
Well, that's like I said last time. Russia doesn't have to worry now about Europe because just between two markets, China and India,
Yeah.
even though with India now there are some issues regarding the currency, the rupees,
Right.
and also the environments in India. It's
Right.
India's going some. As a matter of fact, there is, believe it or not, will you be surprised to hear that there is now a call for no confidence vote on
Mhm.
Modi.
Yeah.
But it's not about the economics.
Yeah.
It's about the rape cases in the ethnic group of in Manipur,
Yeah.
northeastern part of India.
Well,
It's very bad.
it is. And that's
Very bad.
something that has been
It's been going on for a
yeah,
while.
it's and
I remember the foreigner.
Mhm.
She was from Sweden, I think. It was raped there.
Yeah.
It's bad. The
Yeah.
problem for Modi is he's staying silent about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's another
And
conversation.
you can't stay silent
No,
about
no,
the
no,
bad
no, you
stuff that's
can't.
happening.
You can't.
just
You can't.
absolutely can't.
You can't.
You have to come out and deal with it.
Maybe we need to address India in general term
Yeah.
one day. So, but just my point is, when I said about back then that Russia doesn't have to worry, the
Yeah.
two markets between China and India will be enough to replace the whole Europe. The
Right.
reason why it was convenient for Russia in Europe, proximity.
Right.
Pipeline, Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2.
Right.
One of them controlled by the Russians, one of them controlled by the Germans.
Mhm.
So we saw that as a great concern for us.
Yeah.
We never wanted, like I always say, Ukraine conflict wasn't about Ukraine.
Right.
It was about preventing the rapprochement or the closeness, economically speaking, between Europe and Russia. Because if Europe gets closer to Russia,
Mhm.
it's a big problem for us
Yeah.
economically. Because what is at the heart of the economy? Any economy?
Right.
Access to energy.
Yeah. Hands
Simple
down.
as-
Hands down.
Simple
Access
as
to
that, yeah.
energy.
So this is why their economy is
Yeah.
going to be doing well. Let alone now that the ill-conceived policies or sanctions, that is, because it was a failure from the get-go.
Absolutely.
Whoever suggested that wasn't thinking long term. That one precipitated now the shift into
Mhm.
the alliances by having now,
Yeah.
to the Russians, to other global South, whatever they're saying, or maybe this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
Now or never. If the sanctions are conducted through the US dollar,
Yeah.
how about if we get rid of the dollar altogether?
Right.
So we didn't think through the long term as to the impact of something like this. Europeans, of course, had no say.
Yeah.
Europe is, like I always say,
Right.
it's
Right.
like the child that is always in constant need of discipline
Yeah.
and guidance.
Yeah.
So Europe is so weak anyway. So this is why the Russians looked at it in a way that, hey, let's do it right now.
And I don't think that they're going to, like, let's say the US is like, well, just kidding.
Too late for that. Too
it's
late.
Too late.
Too late.
It's
We
too
lost
late.
credibility. It's too late.
Well, and we lost those channels.
Yeah, it's too late. Do you think now we will be in a head of state beside the weak Western leaders?
Yeah.
Will sit down with the Americans and shake hand over an agreement and said, "Yeah, let's do it."
Let's do business.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately the problem. And I think the big issue here is that Russia is the biggest economy that the US has sanctioned. And
Yes.
so when the US did it to small countries, the small countries didn't have any other way of
To-
dealing with it, right?
To fight back.
They
Yeah.
didn't. They didn't. But
Yeah.
Russia does.
Oh, well.
And so for the US to have done this to such a large economy, and basically they pushed Russia and China into this cooperation.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very short-sighted move. Either it was done on purpose to, I don't know, collapse the system. I don't know what, but or it was done out of just not having foresight.
Yeah. The way I look at it, it was a geopolitical miscalculation. That's usually
Because
what
what
it is.
did
It
they
was a
think was going to
miscalculation.
happen? Did they think that an economy this large was
Yeah.
just going to roll over
Yeah.
and just say, "Oh, I guess we'll just not sell our oil anywhere"?
No.
What?
And this is without even access now to Arctic energies yet.
Exactly.
So that's why China, by the way, is involved in investments, because it has to do with
Yeah.
the pipeline, a major pipeline. Interesting enough. And I'm going to go back to Africa quickly
Mhm.
here. There is a pipeline in the conversation that was supposed to go through Niger, from Niger through
Yeah.
Algeria all the way to Europe.
Big
Forget
deal.
about it.
Big
Yeah.
deal.
Algeria is saying,
Yeah.
we might want to think twice about that now.
Yeah.
So because that's it. All the resources at some point, but when just while I'm thinking about it, when France said, well, we're not sending aid anymore and we're not going to be buying uranium, you need to find another customer. Niger said, sure,
Yeah.
we'll just do it with China.
Well, and that's the point. So
Yeah.
I actually want to bring up, so Iranian oil sales in 2022 exceeded those in 2016 before the US withdrew from the nuclear deal in 2018.
Oh, for Iran. Yeah.
And reimposed sanctions,
Yeah,
right? They
yeah.
reimposed sanctions on Iran. Most of the new Iranian oil sales, because remember, it's exceeded,
Yeah.
2022 exceeded oil sales
Yeah.
because the sales have been to China.
Oh, yeah. They got a deal with them, and even in the currency. So,
Right.
and now they're working, by the way, they've been working, they're still working. I'm keeping an eye on the Iran and Russia. They are considering some specific currency between the two. They're working on it to put it together.
Well,
And
and that's a
it's
big deal.
major.
And it's each one of the, because individually it's not that big of a deal, right?
But
Combined
yeah.
together, it does end up being a big deal.
Yeah.
And the issue that I have here is I would like the United States economy to continue to thrive. We live here.
No, we're Americans.
I would love for that to continue to
Yeah.
thrive. But when you push other countries to the brink of desperation or starvation, they are going to
To
figure
do
out
something else.
another plan.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
I think that it is either straight up negligence on the part of the people making these policies, or
Mhm.
arrogance, or I don't know what. But the problem is, if it worked,
Yeah.
I would be in full support of it. But it doesn't work. It only drives people, it only drives countries
Yeah.
to figure out other ways.
Let me
And
s-
that's just human behavior.
You're absolutely correct. Let's say thank you to TNT. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank
you know,
you.
TNT has been with us for
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah, it's good to
Yeah,
see you.
thank you,
TNT.
TNT. I truly appreciate it. You wrote, Dr. Dave, would you address? First one calls me Dave. Hardly, we associate Dave with somebody with a beer and all that.
Yeah,
And I don't drink beer. so
Beer in the,
a
in
good
the-
one. Anyway, Dr. Dave, would you address the Israeli lobby and how it corrupts the U.S. government representatives? If people have not seen the lobby, you need to watch it to see
Yeah.
the corruption involved in the U.S. Yeah, you got a point there, because the Jewish lobby. Now, I'm sorry here. There are two terms most Americans do not differentiate between.
Mhm.
There's the Israeli lobby and the Jewish lobby.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're the two. One of them is not the same as the other,
Mhm.
because one of them has to do with the Jewish nationality ethnicity, and so forth. The other one has to do with the political orientation and so
Yeah.
forth. One thing they share in common, they're both influential,
Yep.
but mainly the one in the political. And that political one, because it's in Congress.
Yeah.
That's why no member of Congress will ever vote against anything for Israel.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
so it's very problematic
It
for us.
is. You're absolutely
Let
right.
alone that we used to send about, I think, if I'm not mistaken, about $4 billion taxpayers every year. Any type of weapon that we develop, Israel will get the first.
Mhm.
And the only country, there are two countries, Israel and Saudi Arabia, that we will never question human rights and all that
Yeah.
when we want to sell a weapon, because in our laws, before we sell a weapon, we have to look at their human rights record.
Mhm.
Those two
Well,
countries, we don't do that.
And it's interesting you don't hear about them.
No,
right?
no, you won't.
hear about human rights violations
For
many other
yeah,
places.
not those two.
And the reason we bring this up is because it's important to pay attention to what's actually happening here. And
Indeed.
and you're absolutely right, TNT, about the lobby.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
It's
That's
very
the
powerful.
bottom line to it. Very, very powerful, very influential. And
Yeah.
I'm telling you this based on experience in Washington.
Yeah.
Not even the president of the United States can go against it.
Yeah. Well, the president of the United States, people think, oh, has all the power.
Oh no.
But that's absolutely not
He's
true.
useless.
And the president of the United States is here minimum 4 years, maximum 8 years. The
Indeed.
people that are really doing this kind of stuff, I mean, quite frankly, look at how long Victoria Nuland's been around. How long has she been
Yeah,
around?
she's been around
It's
for
decades
yeah.
and decades.
And
that
now
she's
she's
been around.
becoming undersecretary of
Right.
state. Big concern.
And so we're looking at the people who are only around for
Yeah.
4 years, 8 years,
Yeah.
and the people who have been around for decades. Who do you think is in power?
You're right.
Right?
You're right. Let's move on to our next topic, last topic, right?
Last topic.
Yes.
Although there's oh man. Okay, so last topic. Saudi Arabia held
Check this out. Check this out.
Okay, let's see. Oh, there it is. Oh, that's a great picture.
Oh.
So Saudi Arabia held peace talks for the peace between Ukraine and Russia. Russia was not invited, which is a very interesting, I think, way to conduct peace talks, but China was invited. And so, this happened over the weekend, and we don't see anything very substantial that came out of this, except that I think it's interesting that as many as 40 countries came to this.
Yeah.
And there's at least the talks about having peace.
Yeah, but you're gonna have to understand this from, again, put it under the lenses of international relations.
Yeah.
Why all of a sudden Saudis are embarking on this initiative? Remember, you had the Chinese,
Right.
you had African leaders, okay, you had Turkey. They all launched some sort of wanted to launch a peace, and they all were shut down.
Yeah.
Now, Saudi Arabia makes you just wonder. It's our allies, of course, but also, is it a concern, or we just, because the question that I will ask is, were they, when I say they, I'm referring to Saudi Arabia and Ukraine, were they given a green light by the US?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Just go ahead and do this for show.
Right.
Or is it like a way out for us because we
Right.
want an end to this war, but we
Right.
don't want to come forward and say, because if we do, what does it mean?
We were lost.
We lost.
We
I will be
were
the person.
wrong.
Yeah. So
And you
this is-
cannot admit that you are wrong.
yeah. And this is why you invite in 40 countries that, and I'll say straightforward, some of them, not all, don't matter
Yeah.
because it's reality.
Yeah.
I don't shy away from saying it. They won't matter in all this. It's like NATO, 31 countries. Do they matter? How
Not-
many countries will
right,
matter?
Right. And not all of them.
You
Right.
pick 2 or 3. That's
Right.
about it.
The biggest economies and then the countries that are closest.
That's it. That's it. So this Saudi thing, I think the way I look at it, we are very concerned about where Saudi Arabia is headed, because remember, it pivoted east.
Absolutely, they did.
I argued back then in 2017. I said, mark my word for it. It's in the book.
Yeah.
When I wrote the book. And I said, it will be just a matter of time before Saudi Arabia and China will enter into some agreement by which they will come to consensus about the currency used for the energy transactions.
Right.
And here it is.
Absolutely.
Is this concern for us?
Yeah.
Most likely it is, because those transactions will be conducted in other currency besides
Right.
the dollar. So, but
And that's what we were afraid of.
Oh, yeah.
Literally, that was the biggest fear.
You're right. But you think about it in terms of what does it mean? You know,
Mm-hmm.
we all know that the US doesn't want any initiative to come from none other than a Western country,
Right.
or maybe one that is a close ally to them.
Right.
Even Saudis, they won't, you know, because I read the 12 points that China proposed.
Yeah.
I read the 12 points that Zelensky proposed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to just share some with you guys. For example, one, it says about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest in Europe,
Right.
returns to Ukraine's control because it's under the control of Russia.
Yeah.
It will be crazy to return it to Ukraine. You can trust them?
Yeah.
You can't. Second one, continuing to operate in accordance with the grain agreement in the Black Sea while expanding it to include all ports.
Mm-hmm.
How can we do that when we went on our
Yeah.
word by cutting off the Russians' shipment but allowing the Ukraine?
Right.
So that won't work. You got a third one, for example, energy security. By reducing the prices of Russian energy resources, protecting Ukrainian installations with air and missile defense systems.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the one that I like about is the number 9, and I'll post this for you guys in the description. Number 6, the withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukrainian territory and the cessation of hostilities against them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
keep dreaming.
The big one. That's
Keep
the
dreaming.
Big one.
But here is the key to all this.
Mm-hmm.
You, Saudi Arabia in this case, wanted to really initiate peace.
Yeah.
What would you do? You will invite parties who are
Right.
involved in the
Exactly.
conflict.
That's my biggest thing
Yeah,
about
just-
this, actually, is Russia was explicitly not invited.
So, yeah.
And how are you? You're absolutely
So where
right.
is credibility?
You're absolutely right. Where is the genuine intention if both parties of a negotiation aren't present?
Present for that.
And that's something
Yeah.
that I've actually seen very much missing from this.
Yeah.
Is that, and remember, this isn't talked about enough, I think,
Nah.
is that there was actually a peace agreement in, I think it was 2022, between Russia and Ukraine. At least they're saying that that's the case.
Oh, the arrangements that
The
was
arrangement,
yes,
right?
yeah.
So this was, I guess, a year ago, maybe
Yeah.
a little over a year ago. And we don't talk about the fact that that was actually reached before there were some people who came and said, hey, no,
they don't want
don't do it. And so where is the genuine intention for peace? I think it doesn't exist.
No.
And even in this case from the Saudis, because Russia wasn't invited, I think that in
just,
itself.
Yeah. Well, it was from the get-go. I mean, when
Yeah.
I heard about it, I kind of knew it's useless anyway.
Yeah.
So it's for show, no more, no less. Because remember, Saudis are losing influence in the Middle East. The Middle
Yeah.
East is shifting geopolitically. And the Saudis, the role they used to play back in the 70s and 80s,
Mhm.
it's not there anymore. So now there is one thing about this proposal by Ukraine President comedian Zelensky.
Yeah.
One that is not included, which to me, it'll make perfect sense. If it was included, at least you would say, well, he's thinking rationally.
Yeah.
But he's not. He's a
Yeah.
comedian. Was comedian, is comedian, whatever you want to call him. One thing has to do with the ethnic Russian speakers inside Ukraine.
Yeah,
How come
that's
it wasn't
interesting.
even addressed?
Yeah.
So if you are to, this is why when they put the number 6, the clause for the return of territory, he's just wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Russia's not going to return this. Those are wanted to be associated with Russia.
Yeah.
It's like what we heard about, well, they're going to take over Crimea.
Right.
It's wishful thinking.
Well, to me, it felt like, when you go to negotiations, but you don't really want them to go through, you
True.
put something in that the other party's just
It's not
flat
gonna-
out not
yeah.
going to do. And then you can turn and say, well, they're the ones that weren't interested in peace. Quite frankly, Russia wasn't invited. So like, I don't even know how they could say
No.
that,
Yeah.
but it didn't seem genuine.
No, it won't.
And negotiations typically, like, you go into them and you say, okay, well, I'm willing to concede this if you're willing to concede this. And you go together to the parties instead of just putting out these lists that nobody seems to pay much attention to.
Yeah.
That's not how a negotiation works. And anybody who's ever been in a negotiation knows that what's happening is not how negotiations work. You go to the table and you say, all right, these are my concessions. These are my hard lines. And you actually talk it through, and together you figure out something.
Yeah. I think the Saudis want just to, again, it must have been some talks between the US and, remember, tensions between Saudi Arabia and the US are strange, shall we say, especially when it comes down to the prince himself in BS after the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, because he found out that we were listening to his conversation. He didn't like that, the fact, well, hey, that's the word. On the other hand, for us is a problem, because once he become a king, we will be dealing with him for the next 50 years. Because the line of succession in Saudi Arabia, and I'm not going to get into this, it's too long. And the line of succession in Saudi Arabia, you always, as a king, you have to wait about 30, 40 years. That's why most of their kings are in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Even Mbia's dad is, what makes his case different, because he didn't wait in line in his turn. He came in front line. There is a second thing, bloodline. His mom is from a different tribe. Saudi Arabia is a tribal society.
Yeah.
Tribe means a lot. Bloodline means a lot. So that's why when I wrote the book about the Saudis, I put there something that he might experience the same fate as his great-grandfather, whatever that was, King Faisal, in 1975 when he was assassinated. So,
well, and that's the thing. Like, it's not wild. It's not crazy to think that.
Oh, no.
I mean, that kind of stuff
Not in
actually
that society.
happens all the time.
Well, especially when you have about 2,000 plus princes. Some and they form tribes within.
Yeah, of course.
That's
of
why
course.
it's not
There's,
gonna,
I'm sure there's infighting, because that's how human beings work when it comes to power. People don't seem to be very responsible when it comes to power, at least in my opinion.
Let alone the tension that the prince had with Biden. Because remember, when Biden was running for office, he called him a pariah. Those words tends to be very, very carry weight.
Yeah. And people hold grudges.
Yeah. And he didn't forget. Remember when President Biden went to Saudi Arabia, how was he greeted?
Oh, very poorly. Yeah.
With the fist. That's how it was greeted. Remember when the Chinese president went to Saudi Arabia, well, how was he greeted? Red carpet.
Yeah.
It tells you right there.
Red carpet.
Yes, it tells you right there. So to me, I won't put too much stock into this. It was just one of these for consumption, domestic consumption, show, relevancy, whatever term you want to use.
It's interesting. I one of the articles that I read, in doing research for this was an article from The Economist, and the title was as talks about possible peace talks start, Ukraine's backers must hold firm. And I was like, really? Why? Why? And this is part of the narrative that I just don't understand, is outside of the democracy argument. Why perpetuate this? And in my opinion, nothing that I read in that point of view would justify maintaining it. And I think that that's a big push right now. At least I hope that it is, for people to understand that there is no real narrative here. There is nothing that actually holds up. Why would Ukraine's backers do that?
Yeah. Well, it's all been, we created the conflict, and we're trying to, most Americans won't even think about it. They don't even know, let alone you ask them, where is Ukraine?
And that's the thing. A lot of people didn't know where Ukraine was, anything about its history. They didn't know what NATO even was. If you ask most people on the street here, I don't think they know what NATO stands for.
No, they won't. Osiris, we want to say thank you. Osiris, great. Thank you so much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate it. So the bottom line, just to sum up this, the idea of the summit, it's not going to matter it didn't matter. It was just 2 days. It was over by Sunday.
Mhm.
It's not going to amount to much. The U.S. has that final say, but the
Yeah.
U.S. is also not directed by the White House, but rather by the influencers behind closed
Yeah.
doors. And the influencers right now, they don't want to see an end to the flow of money
Absolutely.
till the next conflict is set.
Yeah.
That is how they look.
Taiwan.
That's how they're seeing it. This is why we are upgrading
Yeah.
the military hardware in Australia and all that. That is where Africa's gonna be also on the spotlight, but
Yeah.
nothing compared to what's gonna be in Asia. So
Yeah.
let's hope that doesn't happen.
I
but
really,
that's
really
how-
hope.
so-
And that's part of why I think we're doing what we're doing. You bring this up all the time,
Yeah.
David, where it's like it's not enough to just get up every morning and live out your life.
no,
It's important to stand for something. It's important to be part of something. And that's what we're doing here. And I think that's what you guys are also
Yeah.
doing here, is to be part of that voice that says enough of this. Enough of this. Humanity deserves to thrive. At least in
That's
my
true.
opinion,
That's true.
humanity deserves to thrive.
Yeah.
And it shows like this one, and it's you guys watching it, that actually causes that. Because
Yeah.
when things are shrouded in darkness, right? When things are in the shadows and nobody's talking about it, nobody knows about it, it's allowed to continue. But when it's brought out into the light, that's when people say enough.
Enough is enough. That's why we have the course called No Nonsense.
No
right?
nonsense politics. That's right.
Yeah. So, all right, guys. Well, we hope you find this very informative, and we look forward to seeing you next time. As always, prepare yourself for changing world order. Till next time.